All right, let's transition into something that Bo might resemble.
Oh, yeah.
This is what we call, in an affectionate way, messy middle.
Oh, yeah, it's
The
messy,
30s.
right? So in your 30s, this is when a lot of people fall behind. But I want to say it's not their fault. We all kind of own responsibility, but this is a hard decade. This is a hard stage of life. There are 1,000 different things pulling you in 1,000 different directions. You're likely getting married, you're having kids, you're buying a house, you're buying a car, you're advancing in your career, you're impacting your community, and all of a sudden you're like, holy cow, I'm not in control of my life anymore.
Now, I want to, because Reby in our show prep meeting was like, guys, but you have to make sure everybody knows this is still a positive decade.
Oh,
Lots
great.
of greatness.
Oh, it's wonderful.
Even though it's messy, there is still a lot of greatness here. It's, it's the old country music lyric that we always love to say is that the days are long, but the years are short. But it is one of those things where I want to we actually have two charts that we like to show. The first one on the financial stages of life, you can see your disposable income gets squeezed in this messy middle. It is one of those things as you have the family growing, you're getting married, you're buying houses, all the other responsibilities of life just start pulling on everything that's coming in. Your income is getting stretched and allocated, it seems like almost immediately.
Yep.
So that's one stress that creates the messy middle. But besides income, what else is getting squeezed,
The
Bo?
next thing is your time. And I think for a lot of people, this is the hardest part, right? We recognize that with all the stuff that we have going on, we don't actually have time for anything. We want to be great at our job, and we want to be great parents. We want to be great community participants. We want to be great at drinking a gallon of water a day. We want to be great at eating. We want to be great. All these things. And all of a sudden you recognize, holy cow, I woke up, I tried to be great in everything I did, and now it's time to go to bed again. You are not alone. This stage is difficult, and it's supposed to be difficult, and it's not just difficult for you. It's difficult for all the people that are going through it right now, and I think even the people that are maybe on the other side of it, they would agree, yeah, it was difficult. It was hard, but you can make it through it. And there are ways to get ahead even as you're going through this messy stage of life.
Yeah, so let's kind of go ahead and how do you get ahead in this as we want to cover a few of these things. I think it's not losing focus. We all have blind spots. We get busy. So it's important just to make sure we don't leave behind some important stuff just in the chaos that's kind of coming through life naturally. The first thing is don't overlook the power of risk management. What I mean specifically, there's a reason the financial order of operations has two steps that focus on emergency reserves. It's highest deductible covered, which is step 1, and then it's emergency reserves, which is 3 to 6 months on step 4. Don't let your busyness let you overlook just setting up that core basis that's going to keep you protected and also keep you from letting a healthcare emergency or your car, having a car accident or your car losing a radiator, something that you don't see happening on a Tuesday, derailing your financial future.
Yeah, I think it's so interesting. A lot of folks in their 20s, Brian, they'll say, you know what, I've got I need to save up $10,000. I got an emergency fund of $10,000. And then life goes on and life goes on and life goes on. And they don't recognize that they actually need to change that. Oh, well, it was $10,000, but then I got married. And now I got a mortgage, and now I've got kids. That trip to Whataburger no longer is a number one for me. It's number 1, 2 kids' meals, and then whatever my spouse wants, right? It's a different type of thing you have to do. So one of the things that you may need to do in your 30s, especially if you've not done it in a while, is you might have to think about that B word. And I think you know the B word I'm talking about. You may have to look at a budget.
Yeah.
We say that for an emergency fund, you need 3 to 6 months of your expenses and liquid cash available. Well, do you actually know what your expenses are? Do you actually know where your dollars are going? Have you tracked to say, okay, this is how much I spend on utilities, and this is what my mortgage is, and this is how much we eat out, and this is what the grocery bill is, and this is all of the other things. If you've not worked through that exercise, perhaps it's time to do that, if for no other reason, to make sure you have your risks covered, just like what you said on emergency reserves.
Well, what I love is we've tried to create things to help you kind of accelerate your success. Because, the abundance cycle is what drives us here. Is we're going to load you up with all the free advice, all the information, let you become the best version of yourself. But we realized we needed to create some additional tools, some additional resources. So one of the tools that we've added is the Know Your Number course. If you go to learn.moneyguy.com, we have the Know Your Number course. And within the Know Your Number course is actually budgeting. You can work through some budgeting worksheets and other things. And what I love about, really marrying the budgeting process with the Know Your Number course is it lets you kind of then play with the toggles of the tool to kind of see, hey, if I put an extra $100 to work for me a month, what is that actually going to create for me in the future? Because now you can squeeze, how do you cut your expenses? How do you maximize income? All these things are interrelated, but don't skip steps. If you're having struggles with getting to saving and investing 20, 25%, or having struggles getting to emergency reserves, you got to know exactly where every dollar that comes into your army of dollars is going, and a budget is the way you're going to fix that.
I love it. Now, Brian, one of the things I think is interesting, we're talking about how to be wealthy at different ages and different stages. One of the questions we might have is, okay, well, what do my peers look like? If I just think about broadly the folks around me, we know right now the median American in their 30s has just $19,838 saved for retirement. Now, again, if you look at the wealth multiplier and you think about what that $19,000 can turn into, that's fantastic. But I would argue someone at 39 with $19,000 saved versus someone at 31 with $19,000 saved is very, very different. So I do think this is that decade, Brian, where you need to start getting serious about it. You need to start really paying attention to make sure that you're not falling behind, because it is so easy to fall behind in this decade.
Well, I want to, and look, I'm an optimist. You guys know this, but I think if we take into account that we just previously in the 20s, we saw that the average 20-something or the median for the 20s was close to $7,000. And here we are now closing out our 30s, and we're right under $20,000. That's only increasing by $1,000 a year. If you think about the whole decade, that's just not a lot. So I think that there's a lot of lifestyle creep that's actually occurring out there. And people don't realize, look, if you are in the situation where you're getting pay raises, you've been now in the workforce, not for just a few years, but actually over a decade, you should start having some traction. You should start seeing your army of dollars building upon themselves. And I'm just worried that there's a lot of people that don't know where their boundaries are, and they're developing some bad habits.
And I think one of the things that you can take away is that we provide flexibility in our rules to help you save and invest, because we recognize that this is a hard season. So we would make the argument, in an already difficult, hard season, don't make it harder for yourself than it has to be. Take advantage of some of the flexibility that we make available so that you can navigate it well. Because I see so many people, Brian, they get caught up. They're like, okay, I know the average age of a first-time home buyer is 36, and I'm 34 years old, and I need to go ahead and get married and have exactly 1.8 kids, and I got to go buy the house, I got to put 20% down, and you just get lost in this spiral. It's already hard. Allow the flexibility that we put in place to be a reprieve so that you can navigate through this section of life well.
Yeah, we even, because this home buying is a big part of the messy middle, and it's not gotten easier. I actually think it's gotten, well, I don't have to say I think. I know for a fact it has gotten much harder. The home buying is especially hard, and that's why we do, if you go to moneyguy.com/resources, we do have a home buying checklist, because Bo, we have actually created a case study to show when you say lean into the flexibility of our rules, we have not had to change our rules. You know, you hear a lot of financial gurus have been saying, put down 20% so you can avoid the PMI. We've seen for decades now that that's just not the reality for most people. You know, most people on their very first home will only be able to put down 3 to 5%. But there's also another big decision besides just taking advantage of flexibility on that first home purchase and the down payment. It's also, do you choose a 15-year or do you choose a 30-year mortgage? Walk them through a case study we did.
Yeah, so let's think about this. Let's say a young couple, first-time home buyers, with a median household income of $74,580 household, so $75,000 household, want to buy a house. They're going to put 3% down, and they have to keep their monthly payments, principal and interest, below 25%. They understand the guardrail. So they're going to use the flexibility of the 3%, and they're going to understand the guardrail of keeping their monthly payment below 25% of income. The question they have is, well, should I choose a 15-year or 30-year? Well, I've listened to financial stuff, and I know, man, 15-year, I got to do it, I got to do it, I got to do it. This is what we mean by don't make things more difficult on yourself than maybe they have to be. Because if you actually look at this, if you assume that the 30-year mortgage has a 7.44% rate, we went and pulled that from current rates right now, and the 15-year has a 6.75% rate, and you do the mathematics to figure out, based on that monthly payment, how much house that they could afford. If they do a 15-year mortgage and they're trying to stay inside the guardrails, they can only buy a $181,000 house. However, if they use the flexibility of a 30-year mortgage, even though rates are at a higher level right now, they would be able to buy a $230,000 house as opposed to a $181,000 house.
And this is another reason I would really strongly encourage, go check out that checklist, because this is a moment in time. Yes, mortgage rates are way high right now. It's ridiculous how high mortgage rates are right now. But this is a moment in time. There will be reversion to the mean where we will come back down a little bit lower. I know when we did this 2 years ago, Bo, there was purchasing power was over $350,000 just because of the change in interest rates. So that's why it's important, if you go through our housing checklist, you can kind of look and not only take into account where interest rates are, but how long can you stay in an area? What's going on with your job? What's going on with your needs in your life? And figure out where the intersection point is so you don't force it in this moment in time where we have these super high interest rates. But it also will protect you from, if you find a good house and values in your area are starting to kind of come back down into a reasonable territory, you'll have the resources. You'll have measured twice, cut once, and made the right decision for your house. Do not overlook this is part of the messy middle. That's why we try to give you the resources to do it the best way possible.
I love it. And then the last thing, in terms of how do you get ahead in your 30s in this season of life, is work on building good habits. Because here's the fact of the matter. If you're not building good habits, then there's a really good chance that you're building bad habits. I mean, it's really easy to see this on finance if you're racking up credit card debt and you're not saving. But this is a stressful season of life, so it's really easy to also not have really great communication with your spouse, to not be there when your children are young, to not take care of your health, and not focus on moving your body and exercise. All of these different things, if you're not intentionally trying to put good habits in place, bad habits will likely fill the void, and your 40-year-old self is going to wake up and say, man, how'd I get here? Versus your 40-year-old self waking up and saying, holy cow, I did it. I made it through. I can see light at the end of the tunnel. That's the place that you want to be at as you move out of the messy middle.
There are so many correlations between health and finances. And I think a lot of people in your 30s, you're old enough now that you've had over a decade, that you've been out of school, but you're still young enough that you can pretty much do anything that a young person can do without physical limitations. Well, it's the same way with your financial life too. Yes, your dollars do not have the potential to multiply exponentially as much as they do in your 20s, but still, when you compare a 30-something to the 40-year-olds, the 50-year-olds, and 60-year-olds, the world is still your oyster. So I'm just telling you, take advantage that this is the moment, the decade, that just like you can get back into doing bench presses and squats and other things and exercise and get the best version of yourself, you can also do that to your personal finance. Don't let this decade slip through your hands where you're going to have much harder catch up. If you start this in your 40s and 50s, I want you to build that base financial health right now in your 30s.
And here's a great example of that, Brian. If you just save an extra 1% starting at age 30, by the time that you get to retirement, that 1% additional savings will replace 4.7% of your pre-retirement income. So your dollars still have juice in your 30s. So maybe, again, you're not hitting that 25% because life got hard and you have the messy middle and things going in 1,000 different directions. Maybe you're only saving 10%. Great. How do I get it to 11%?
Yep.
How do I get to 12? How do I get to 13? Because in your 30s, it still has a huge impact on what your future financial independence life looks like. So if you can make those hard decisions now, it will allow you to hopefully get to make much easier decisions later.
Well, and what's cool to me is that when you're in your 30s, we know that you're getting serious about life because I think you do recognize you're not at the midlife crisis phase, but you're definitely kind of getting purpose and your whys figured out. This is the phase still where if you realize and you said, you know what, I just got a 6% pay raise. If I take 3 to 4% of that, I could effectively increase my retirement income by 15 to 20%.
Yep.
That's incredible and still a lot of bang for every good decision you make. So remember, maximize every incremental decision that comes your way, because this is the moment to capture still a lot of opportunity in the messy middle of the 30s.